Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second session today. My name is Luke, and I'm an Enterprise Account Director here at Cascade, based out of Santa Monica, California, and I'm honored to be joined by such a distinguished group of panelists for our discussion today. I'll start off by giving some quick introductions. Our first panelist here, a trailblazer in the corporate world, is Filiz Akdede. As the general manager of HP Large Format Group in Europe, Filiz has a remarkable track record of leadership and innovation, having previously served as the managing director of HP in Turkey, and then moving on to her current role in Barcelona as EMEA Large Format General Manager. She has successfully guided organizations through turbulent times. Her achievements extend beyond her professional roles, as she was recognized as one of the most powerful women CEOs in Turkey, both by The Economist and Fortune in 2017 and 2018. With a background in economics from Istanbul Bosporus University and leadership training from Stanford University, Filiz is a true thought leader in our midst. Our second panelist, Amnah Ajmal, serves as the EVP for Market Development in the EMEA region at MasterCard. Her responsibilities encompass a wide array of strategic initiatives, including acceptance, acquiring, merchants, digital partnerships, fintech strategy, and M&A. Amnah's illustrious career has seen her lead the North America product organization for MasterCard, focusing on creating competitive differentiation and driving innovation. Recognized as one of the top 100 women in fintech and a top 25 women leader in financial technology, Amnah Ajmal's insights in the financial industry and navigating chaos will be really enlightening in our discussions today. And last but not least, our third panelist, Mr. Malcolm Staves, brings a wealth of experience from the realm of health and safety. As a global VP of Health and Safety at L'Oreal, Malcolm is a fellow of the Institute of Chemical Engineers and the International Institute of Risk and Safety Management. His background in chemical engineering and integrated environmental management has uniquely positioned him to lead in his field. With a focus on risk management, visible felt leadership, and placing people at the center of health and safety, Malcolm is at the forefront of driving safety strategies on a global scale. His innovative approach, which he eloquently discussed in his 2022 TED Talk, highly recommend you all give it a listen, has positioned him as a futuristic thought leader in health and safety. Thank you all for being here today. Cannot wait to get in. Where our first session focused on identifying chaos and how to make effective decisions, our discussion in this panel will dive deeper into how to maintain focus and alignment and visibility to enable your teams to not only make these decisions, but progress them to results. To kick things off, I'd love to hear more about some situations where each of you have faced chaos and effectively rallied your teams around the decisions to move forward and actually see those results come through. So Filiz, I'd love to pass it to you to kick us off. Can you share an experience that you've had in this space?
Sure. Thank you, Luke. Let me give you an example from 2018, where I was the managing director of Turkey. As you know, Turkey is an emerging country, like Brazil, India, South Africa. It has a volatile economic environment. Turkey was growing at that time, but fueled by high current and fiscal deficit. And it was impacting the whole economy, inflation environment, and it was a bit difficult period. On top of everything, there was a dispute between President Erdogan and the president of Turkey and President Trump at that time. And that brought in a day economic some difficulties, sanctions, etc. And from year 2017 to 18, Turkish currency devaluated 40%, and half of it was in 1 month. Just give you the perspective, we were selling at SHP in dollar currency. So you can imagine that in 1 week, in 1 month, our product prices increased 15-20%. And we had to manage all these crises, big deals, credit and collections and inventory in a very limited time period. So we enjoyed the chaos very well during that period, I have to say.
That sounds like quite the macro environment factor that really affected the team. So I'm excited to hear how the teams really rallied around that and how you charted a path forward. But I'd love to pass this along to Amnah, because I believe you have a similar experience when it comes to macro environment factors as they introduce. Is that correct?
Yes. So I was living in Poland in 2008, and I was in banking, and we were one of the largest banks in consumer credit card, consumer loans, and mortgages. And just, I think, a week before Christmas, a regulation came, which was supposed to be implemented a day before Christmas. So we actually had 5 working days to implement it. And the regulation basically was around how would we use the credit bureau, how would we underwrite. And the regulations were interpreted in such a way that it meant that our approval rates would drop from 80% to 20%, which meant that more than half of our business would be wiped out. It had an impact on the distribution, on the sales force, on the collection teams, on the credit underwriting teams. So the thousands of people whose jobs would be impacted because there would be no business left to be served. So pretty chaotic, and a week before Christmas.
Yeah, nothing like a tight time frame to fix something like that and figure out a path forward. I'm really excited to learn more about that as it affects the focus and alignment around how you rally a team on what seems to be such an insurmountable obstacle. Malcolm, from your perspective as well, I'd love to hear from the health and safety side. What's an environment where you've been able to impact these components and figure it out?
Yeah, I think the situation, the crisis that has affected us the most over recent years from a health and safety point of view has been the COVID pandemic. I remember at the time, it was in China. We thought it was going to be localized within L'Oreal, and we went all over the world sort of getting masks for people and gel for people and sending it all over to China, because we thought, like most of the other things in the past, like bird flu, etc., it would be contained. Then when it came to Europe and beyond, we realized that we'd been caught with our trousers down. Okay, we couldn't find masks. Like a lot of other companies, everybody was scrambling. And within L'Oreal, we put ourselves into crisis mode. So in crisis mode, we have a single group of people, which is our security people, that bring together the relevant teams to manage the crisis, right? And that team decides on the true north for L'Oreal. So not just because it became a global crisis, it's not just local, it's global. So we take a little bit of the thinking out of it for people. We give them a little bit the light at the end of the tunnel, the direction, the true north where we want them to go into. But what's important for us, and I just want to mention it now, because we have an approach which is what I call the flip of VUCA. Now, I don't know if the previous sessions have mentioned VUCA, but everybody knows what VUCA stands for. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and what's the third one now? Fourth one, ambiguous. Within L'Oreal, we like to flip it. The way to manage through chaos and to get the results and get the actions done is to flip it. And so you look at vision, you look at understanding, you look for clarity, and you look for agility. So that's the way we see it. So, and I'm sure we're going to discuss that a little bit later.
Absolutely, Malcolm. Now, it's a really great topic you raised around the framework of decision making you took when you faced this chaotic event, and kind of the methodology that your teams kind of rallied around. Filiz, when it comes to the approach that you took in, number one, charting a path forward with the challenges that you faced in the chaos, did you apply a similar methodology? What was your way of rallying the team together to organize a path forward?
Yes, we applied similar strategy, but let me first start with the culture, because when you are in the chaos environment, when you are in the turbulence, you cannot just change everything all of a sudden. You have to get prepared before, and you have to be ready, because when the things are good, when the environment is safe, everybody is happy. But when the times we are facing difficulty, it's the time to test our team's endurance and our persistence and resilience. So that's the time. So long before, you have to be ready for these kind of turbulences. What is important for our case is inclusiveness, because especially in the emerging markets, people are used to work under these kind of crises, in these kind of turbulences. So if it is not economic crisis, political crisis, there are some unrest, etc. So in time, you build a resilient team that can work under VUCA times. So that's extremely important. And the general thing in the big companies, when there is a crisis situation, we have a tendency to centralize some of the decision making, which is a very difficult and wrong thing, because you have to simplify things for the team, empower the team, be inclusive, because you need more creative ideas. You cannot work like before, so you need more creativity, and you have to build a creative environment. That means transparent and within trust relationship. Otherwise, people just don't, people hold themselves, and you cannot create a good team environment. So what we did for Focus, first, acknowledge the problem and transparency, better communication. But as I said long ago, you need to build a diverse team that can work together and bring different ideas together. That was the main thing for us. And luckily, I had the good team at time period, and we went through this period without any damage.
I love to hear that. I think you touched on some incredible points there. Amnah, does that relate to your experience as well?
Yes. So I know Filiz touched upon culture and people. I think the first thing which happens when chaos happens is that people feel that this would impact them negatively. And that's true, actually. You know, you think about your job, you think about your family, you think about a lot of negative things that can happen, right? It's not a positive state of mind. And to be honest, I was a pretty new leader in a country where I did not speak the language, where I was new to understanding the market, and there's regulation hits, right? So, and people had planned their holidays, their Christmas plans, so even the timing was not really great. And I don't know how many of you have experienced winters in Poland, but it's like negative 20 degrees. The whole city, Warsaw, looks like a black and white picture. So it's not that it's very optimistic if you look out of the window also. It's pretty much like black and white life, right? So I think it was kind of a down moment for the entire team, because I remember my office, there used to be a bright red couch. We were sitting there, and we were like, we calculated the impact of the business, and we were like, okay, we would only be left with 20% of the business. Do you really need this huge sales force, credit underwriting team, collections team for that? And very quickly, people started to calculate the impact, and it meant thousands of people would not have a job anymore. And people looked up to me as if I would have an answer, but the reality is I did not. And I was very transparent and open that I don't think so. I have an answer. And I agreed that the impact could be that bad. And I think it was kind of that moment where we connected, because everybody felt that I was not raising myself and elevating myself from the situation and saying, hey, I was not like the cheering person in the room and saying everything is going to be great. But I kind of became part of them, not intentionally, but that was just my natural reaction, that I don't know our way out of this situation. And yes, it does look pretty bad. I think that was the first way that actually all of us connected sitting in that room, that yes, it is that bad. So I think that connection of how bad it was, to me, was the first point where all of us were on the same page. It was bad. It was dull. It was not great. Nobody thought about, oh, let's gather our energies, let's roll up our sleeves, and let's figure our way out. There's always an opportunity in some regulation. No, it was pretty depressing. It was pretty sad. Everybody was like, yeah, this is the end of it. But we connected on that note first.
I love that, Amnah. I think you touched on some really good points there, especially the way that all of these stories come together. I think it dovetails really nicely, Malcolm, into what you were raising around VUCA, the vision, and aligning those teams around how do we chart our path forward, and we do that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit different to what Filiz said. We have, in a chaos situation, when we're bringing in our crisis teams, etc., we have a single focus. You know, we decide on the path, the vision, where we're going to go. But in the sense, like a guiding star or a North Star, is that we're prepared to change and be agile as we go along. But we believe in bringing the right people together. And I would even say now, to use a topical term, a psychological safe environment, looking for effective, high-performing team of people that directs the company in a certain direction, but then allowing flexibility and adaptability at local level within that frame, within that skeleton. So we bring those people together that drive towards what our objective is, the North Star, but also allows them the flexibility. And, you know, within COVID, we had to change our mind all the time. I mean, as the virus was developing, our knowledge and understanding of what was important and what was not important changed. There was one point when we were sort of putting into quarantine all parcels and things like that. And then later on, we found it wasn't so much of a problem. So you have to be adaptable when you're driving through chaos, when you do, and you have to have a strategy to get yourself through it. And within L'Oréal, bringing this team together at corporate level, and then having the teams at maybe at regional levels and country levels as well, with all that cascading and all being on the same page, going in the same direction. Honestly, it gets us through it. And it's worked several times for several major crises for L'Oréal.
Amazing. I think we've all touched on some really powerful points here around developing that strategy, creating that alignment, understanding that visibility. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into the tactical application of that. What strategies or methodologies or processes have you all used to facilitate that in an effective way that the audience might learn from?
I can start. For us, especially as Malcolm touched, you need to be more and more flexible. And the dialogue is becoming more and more important within the teams, because under normal circumstances, you have the cadence of meetings, you communicate. But in these kind of periods, you need to communicate intentionally, and you have to care and listen deliberately. So it's very important the groups understand each other. With that purpose, I actually set a lot of meetings, and there was a tension, as Amnah mentioned. People couldn't see the direction, there wasn't clarity. So in these meetings, we again focus on what is our real purpose, what's the projection, and what do we want to do for our customers. So this kind of alignment we brought in these meetings. And it wasn't only business meetings, we need to socialize more. Actually, we did some outside activities as well, because under this kind of stress, people can have a difficulty to understand each other. But if you bring the personal point of view, everybody is trying for the best of the company, for the best of our business. So bringing them together in the social environment helped us to reduce the tension within the team. So this was extremely important for us, and intentionally we did that. And even though we need to be flexible, we in a way clarify the roles and responsibilities, because sometimes, as mentioned by Malcolm, you have to give the decisions in the very short time period, and you have to jump in, but at least to set the roles and responsibilities, who is going to do what in this situation. So we clarified once again, but I can just collect them under the name of dialogue, better dialogue together. It really worked well for us.
Amazing. Amnah, would you like to add on your side?
Sure. So I think after connecting because of vulnerability and transparency, the second task was that we had to implement the regulation. And it was interesting because you're implementing in a way, the team who's implementing it is actually knows that after implementing this, it's their job, which would not exist, right? And they have to implement it rightly because it's a regulation and it's a banking industry. So we had 5 days. And we started meeting, and the focus was how to just implement the regulation right. And then, okay, we'll think about it when we come back, because 5 days is pretty stringent time zone for banks, which have systems and, different kind of systems. And it's a huge risk if anything goes wrong. And when those meetings were happening, where we were discussing how to implement it, there was no focus at that time on how bad the situation is. That phase has kind of passed. We all were transparent with each other. As a leader, I shared my vulnerable situation that, yes, even I do not know a path out of there. So we were all together in one room trying to figure out how we will get to the next 5 days and implement it. And at one point in time, we were just ordering food, having breaks over pizzas. And we started discussing our families and parents in the breaks. And I remember my mom once said to me that, and you usually never care about when your mom is saying something to you. You only remember it years later. So everybody should listen to their moms. That there's nothing so bad that can happen to you that no good comes out of it. And I was like thinking to myself, that's so wrong, because look how bad this is happening. Everybody around me is so upset. And what good can come out of this situation? It's bad, and that's it. Only bad will come out of it. And then we finish our food, and I gather everybody together, and I'm like, is there a way, if for a minute we just think about it, that we are not in this situation, but let's think together as a group, do you think this could be an opportunity for us to do something different? And everybody was like, how's that possible? I'm like, let's think, we are not in this situation. Let's think and agree together. We're not part of this situation. Let's step out of this situation and think as outsiders. Do you think this could be an opportunity to do something different? Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. And that was the kind of an aha moment when people just disconnected themselves from the current situation. We're like, okay, let's spend 2 hours discussing and brainstorming, and we'll get back to the implementation. And I just all of a sudden realized that people started coming up with bright, great ideas. It was like the energy was flowing in the room. All of a sudden, there was some alignment. And then that alignment in people's ideas helped me frame a vision. We could transition from physical channels to digital. We could actually come up with products which are more innovative and more affluent. We could actually leverage a wealth management part of the business and cross-sell to that part of the business. These ideas kept on coming, which were almost transforming the entire bank, because we were thinking about repositioning the bank, the channels, the growth aspect of it, the partnership angle of it. But the whole room, all of a sudden, was filled with positive energy. And I was there on the whiteboard with a few other folks. We started writing a new vision. We started creating a new strategy. It was like we were kind of in this tunnel, and we just saw this bright new world out there, and everybody was connected and aligned to just participate in that. So for me, that was like an amazing, magical moment happening.
I love that example, Amnah, and I couldn't agree more. We definitely need to listen to our mothers. I'm guilty of that myself, but I loved the idea culture that you were able to create there. Malcolm, would you like to add anything to this piece?
Not a lot, because I think the discussions have been good already. But I think what we've found is important as well. Whenever you're trying to drive through chaos, whatever your approach that you put in place, what you need to have is you need to have follow-up. You need to follow through. You need to communicate extremely well. So I remember, for example, at one point we decided that we needed all our sites to have thermal cameras, right, to measure temperature, etc. Of employees if they were coming into the office. We just went out and bought a lot of thermal cameras straight away, and we delivered them to our sites. But what we did in that case, we identified the problem, we decided to act, and then we followed through, and then we delivered. And it's the same at the site level as well. When we're talking about making sure that ventilation systems are used in the right way, we have enough mass, etc. You need to follow through on the individuals to make sure that they are delivering. And that was very important to us as well. Communication and follow through, which a lot of organizations sometimes are very good at deciding what they want to do. They're not so good when it comes to follow up and support. And that was something that came out of the COVID pandemic that really struck me was important for deploying strategy.
I think that's such an interesting point you raised there around accountability and that follow through, making sure not only are we aligned on what we're doing and we're focused on the right things, but we actually know that these are getting done and we're holding each other accountable to that. I think that's the other side of visibility. On one hand, you have the visibility of making sure people understand the problem, they're moving towards the right direction, but also the visibility on how we're actually doing as we approach and we tackle these components. So I think that's a really great point you raised there. On the topic of transparency, we talked a lot about culture. We talked a lot about creating this authenticity, the space and comfortability for an idea culture to be created. I'm curious, is there ever too much transparency? How do you rally the team around making sure you're communicating the right things and maybe not introducing unnecessary information that might create chaos?
That's a very good question. You have to, I'm a believer of transparency, but at some point, if there's so many information and these are unnecessary information for the team, and if you believe that it's going to ruin the positive environment, so you can filter it. I don't mean that hiding it, but you can filter what to share or what you can handle. If a manager pour down all the information to the subordinates, so at some point everybody will be dealing with the same problem. But if you filter and if you take some of the problems to your management level and handle maybe with your upper management, can give more space to your team to work some other topics. And you can share that with the team. So I don't mean that you're hiding information, but I'm filtering some part of it for you. So you deal with this part. I'm going to try to convert message to some other entities, etc. This is important. The most important thing, in my opinion, is to keep the environment positive, because a lot of problems, a lot of things that you need to deal with. So you have to be very careful as a manager and observe who is struggling the most, maybe being with that person. In my example, it was credit and collection finance. So they were really struggling that. So I told them that, okay, this part, let's do this together, because it's too much work for you and it's very difficult to handle that. So why don't we take this part together? That was one thing. And I help on that. And on the other side, I don't really think that there is too much transparency, but I believe in filtering the things that people and team can focus on, the most important part. And that can only be with the trust relationship. People should believe in you and you should be earning that trust so that everybody can do their part clearly. That's my experience.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Filiz. Amnah, I've seen you come off mute. Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so they were people with whom I would have a career development session, and I would say, I see you as a successor for my job, and someone would say, no, I don't want that, and be like, why? They're like, it's too stressful for me. I don't want that. So all the information is not to be shared with everyone, even though if you are a believer of transparency, because everybody does not have the same ability to handle stress, right? That's why certain people are in certain jobs and some are not, right? So for me, it was a great lesson in those career development conversations when I could see that they're certainly great leaders, but they felt that my job was stressful and they were not up for it. They just did not want it. I fully respect their choice. So that's the principle that I would apply in sharing information also, right? You, of course, need to pass on the information to people to whom it matters. But then you need to take the individual personalities into account. How do you frame the narrative? How openly you lay it out there versus if you give optionality of that narrative. Like I know Lucas has nerves of steel, so I would just tell you right there. Whereas I may feel that, okay, Malcolm may get a little bit more tense about it. So let me take him out for a walk and, try to talk him over there. So I think those are the things that leaders need to understand and get around it, because not everybody can absorb the same amount of stress. And chaos is stress. That's it. It's chaotic. It's a stressful situation.
Absolutely.
I think if I can, I think it does come down to leadership, but the way I like to approach it, and maybe this is my personal style, is that between my team, anything goes, right? Complete transparency. We discuss things. Because what I don't want is for somebody to hold back, and it could just be that critical idea that would spark something else in somebody else, right? So it needs trust as well, as Filiz said. So, but at the end of the day, a decision has to be made if we're going to go forward, right? Especially if you're managing a crisis situation. Once the decision is made, however that decision is made, and it could be somebody in my team, it could be me, because if somebody has a good decision in my team, I go with it, right? If it feels like the right decision and we get sort of a unanimous sort of like saying, yeah, let's go with it. On the other hand, once we make a decision, we all follow that decision. Okay, with the flip VUCA approach, we need to be agile as well. When we get more signals, more information coming in, whereby if we need to change that decision, we need to be quick to change, right? We need to be quick to change. But the objective remains the same in the sense, when I was talking about COVID, the objective was to keep our families, our workforce safe, but also to keep our factories continuing to operate, producing gel hand gel and everything for hospitals, etc. So, we had three main objectives that we needed to do within L'Oreal, and that was it. And that was our approach.
I love that. And Malcolm, I'd love for us to come back before we get to Q&A around VUCA a bit, because it's been blowing up in the chat and it's very well received by the audience. And I'd love to explore that a bit more. But one question that came up, we launched a poll at the start of this discussion around what do your teams struggle with the most? And the leader right now across our audience is really sitting with alignment. And I think to your point around, once we chart our path, once we have those objectives, that alignment component, what advice do the three of you have for those teams that struggle with alignment when it comes to how they bring their teams towards these outcomes?
I can go first if you want.
Jump right in.
That's a brilliant question, because people that struggle, I think you really have to take them for a walk, as was said earlier. Because they're struggling for a reason. It could be for stress. They've got things going on in their own personal lives, etc. So you need to understand: are they struggling because of external impacts or internal impacts? But it's important to find out where their comfort zone is as well. And for me, at that level, it becomes very individualistic. You have to deal with people as the individuals that they are. And as a leader, you should be able to recognize the low-level signals in an individual to say, okay, this person's struggling. It's time to have a nice conversation, an open conversation, a transparent conversation. That's how I deal with it.
I may continue with an example. My team struggle the most about the ambiguity, this uncertainty in the environment, and also uncertainty on their future. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, when the currency is going down because of devaluation, their salaries are also going down. And also they cannot achieve their quota. It was the personal part, and they didn't know how long it's going to take. So for a company, it's very important to assure we are here for you. You are part of the team, and we'll do our best to protect your best benefit, whatever it is. So you cannot, of course, promise for the world, but you can just promise that we are going to do our best under this environment. So we try to clear this uncertainty out of the way, and we immediately work on sales compensation, especially for sales team, because they cannot reach their quota, they cannot have their salaries, etc. It was important, and we did some exceptions. And that also applies the rest of the channel, the rest of our partners. Whenever there is such kind of situation, you can do some simple but fast changes that would clear the unrest in the environment and clear uncertainty. This is the persistence of the company. You cannot achieve all the targets all the time, but at least you can do that whenever you have the chance. That worked for us.
Perfect. Amnah, would you like to add anything to that discussion around alignment?
No, Malcolm and Filiz described it very well. The only one thing I would add is that leading with empathy and compassion becomes even more important in times of chaos. So if you have that empathy and compassion, to Malcolm's point, you would understand that these are the individuals who are actually not responding well, but more importantly, why are they not responding well? When you're aligning them towards a purpose or a vision, and you're trying to get out of that chaotic situation, then everybody would not be with you on the journey. But for you as a leader to understand why those who are not with you on the journey are actually not with you, that's important. And that happens when you lead with empathy and compassion.
Amazing. Thank you all for that breakdown. I think that's been really helpful for the group. I know we're going to transfer over to Q&A here in a couple minutes, but Malcolm, I would love it if you could expand a little bit on the VUCA terminology, the swap that you've defined, because it's really resounded well in our chat. I've been seeing it blow up ever since the start of the conversation there.
Well, just to let everybody know, it's not something that I've invented. I'm sure I've seen it somewhere, and I've sort of borrowed it. But many, many years ago in L'Oreal, we started talking about VUCA in the, I'm going to say in the old sense, of sort of like volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we started to look for a different way through this, because we believe that developing strategy, you need to realize the world is in chaos, and chaos is exponential. It's not going to go away, right? You know, whether it be social media, whether it be the internet, etc. And you need to find a way to get through it. And rather than having a negative outlook on it, which VUCA, as you know, is negative, we look for a positive way. And we found the idea of setting your vision, understanding, you know, the situation, what you're working in, the context, knowing that it might change tomorrow or the day after, then looking for clarity towards that vision, right? And be prepared to be agile. We have another thing in L'Oreal I'm going to add, and I know I haven't mentioned it earlier, about what we call the hummingbird approach, right? Which was something that is dear to my heart, is that every little act counts. And if we all make a little change in the right direction towards our North Star, then we're going in the right direction. But maybe one day we may end up finding that we're over in China or we're in the Antarctic. Well, that's fine. If that's where you need to go to. On the other hand, you need to do a little bit of a test and say, okay, how do I realign back to where my objective is, etc. So you need to be agile within your framework, within your business concept. It works for us, and it allows us to see not only the long game, but also the short game.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you all for your discussion today. This has been really insightful. I know I've learned a lot. I know from the chat, the audience has been loving the discussion as we've been going on. And I think now is a good time for us to actually take some questions from the audience and look into that. Are there any final points that any of you would like to make that you feel you weren't able to give today before we jump into Q&A? Awesome. Then we can go ahead and get started. So for this first question, decisions don't stick. How do you document, memorialize, and measure the impact of decisions? This is coming from Charlie Dunn. Would anyone like to jump in and answer this one?
I would say completely open, transparent, is that there's opportunity for improvement for most companies in that area. I think we'd all admit that sometimes we make decisions and the output is the output. Normally we're happy with it. But what we don't do is look back and look at, okay, what is the impact of maybe a decision when it does go well, or maybe when it doesn't go so well, if you know what I mean. Could the decision have been better? Can we learn from it? I think that's a really good question, and I don't have the answer.
That's all good.
I also don't have the answer, but probably I would just add one thing to it. I think, and I do that also, at leaders, many times we emotionally get attached to our decisions. And I think at times you have to be disconnected a little bit from your decision. When in my previous life, I used to be a product person, I would like design that product. It would be like meeting that customer need, and I would be like obsessed with it. And then the product fails. And you're like, no, that can't be possible. You know, customers have changed their mind. You know, they don't know what they want, right? So you almost at times have to be emotionally disconnected from your decisions at work. Then you can just be an outsider and view it and say, yeah, it did not work. Here are the learnings. Let's move on. So I think when you emotionally become too, you should be, because you should be passionate about what you do. But at the same time, when it's time to analyze it, you should emotionally disconnect yourself. A lot of time, your ego or your emotion comes in the way of admitting that decision may not be the right one.
I love that. And one thing I would add as well from my own experience working with customers and their strategy here at Cascade, one big piece of this is creating the right visibility around what is that decision doing? What is the intended output? And what are we doing? So you have the right visible and tracking of understanding how something like that might be impacted, instead of, like Malcolm, you mentioned, just looking at the outputs and then maybe not reflecting and moving forward. Thank you so much for that question, Charlie. Let's pull one more up from the audience here, because I know we've run a little bit over. So how to keep our teams motivated to achieve results when chaos is taking over, from Daniel out of Milwaukee.
I would start. I was gonna add that maybe one more time, highlighting the recognition. especially during crisis period, we are so focused on resolving the problems, but we forget to celebrate together, even the small achievements, recognizing people. And also in these kind of periods, we find some hidden talents within our organizations. So recognizing them, empowering them, bringing them under the light really works. What worked for my team, like Malcolm and Amnah mentioned, embracing the faults as well. So we said, we are good in that, but we made a mistake. Let's move on. We have a good achievement. Let's celebrate that. And it's the team spirit and embracing difficulty and including inclusiveness of the different ideas. If we help people to open up, come up with creative ideas, and asking difficult questions to us, if we create this kind of environment, that really helps. And I see that it really works well. It really worked well for my team in the past.
Amazing. Anything else to add?
I can add something. I'm not going to. What I'm going to say is not necessarily easy to do, but it's something that I try to do. It's a personal thing, and we've done it through a number of chaos situations that we've lived through over the last few years. Is that I try to install, if that's the right word, a sense of pride and a sense of purpose in my team. Right? See the bigger picture. When we were going through COVID, it was all about saving lives. Right? So I try and find that connects to their personal values. It takes effort. It's individualistic. But that's, I think, the role of a leader, and really connect with them to understand what drives them. And sometimes in chaos, you do need to give the direction, because people's natural reaction is to panic, to lose control. So sometimes the leader, I think, has to be a little bit more top down than maybe he would like to be or they would like to be, because the situation warrants it. But you have to choose that to do that at the right kind of time. But if people are going into panic mode, they're losing control, you need to help put them back on the rails.
Absolutely. Amnah, anything else to add to that point before we wrap up?
Well, I always tell my team, and I'm sure it's not the saying that I came up with, good news, take the elevator, bad news, take the stairs. Your team need to have that faith in you, as a leader, that yes, you are embracing bad news. That itself is a big motivation for the team in the time of chaos, because things will go wrong, and more wrong,
Yes.
I love that. Amnah, your sayings, I'm going to be writing all of those down throughout this process. You've got the best sayings.
Like Malcolm, they're also not mine.
Well, I appreciate all of you joining me for this panel today. It's been incredibly informative. Really, really appreciate all the insights and thoughts that have come through. I apologize for anyone whose questions we didn't get to. We'll be having some roundtable discussions at the end of the event if you'd like to continue delving into this topic. But in closing, I would like to introduce our next panel, panel 3, where Sam will be moderating a discussion around technology and the application of it to help support these processes. So looking forward to seeing you all at the next event, and please connect with any of the speakers or myself on LinkedIn to continue the discussion from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.